Reserving the right to object. No one disputes that drones flying in airspace could be a danger, that drones flying over the Super Bowl could be a danger, that drones flying over our military bases could be a danger. That's why it's illegal. It's currently illegal, and the federal government has the capacity to investigate and stop drones that are in airspace, over our military bases, following our ships. We have that capacity. But what is disputed, and what the Biden administration is currently telling us, is they don't see a problem. So if there is a problem, let the Biden administration be forthcoming. Let us know the extent of the problem. Let us know who's flying the drones, and let us know what's going on. Instead, this bill says, well, we don't know. The Biden administration doesn't know, but why don't we give the power to the local officials to go after drones? But I rise today to object to this unanimous consent request because at the time, public trust in government is in historic lows. This body must not rush to grant sweeping surveillance powers without proper consideration and debate by the committees of jurisdiction, which is what I pledge to do beginning in January when we will be in charge of the committees. Yet what is going on is exactly what this legislation seeks to do now, is to expand federal authority to intercept communications and disrupt drone activity, powers that raise serious concerns for Americans' privacy, civil liberties, and Fourth Amendment protections against unwarranted search and seizure. We are being told this legislation is urgent, that it is needed to address an imminent drone threat, yet the government itself admits no such threat exists. So either there is a threat or there isn't a threat, but the Biden administration keeps saying, well, it's all normal stuff and it's just planes. So it is or it isn't. Why don't we try to get to the truth of the matter of what actually exists and what the threat is before we propose legislation? Federal agencies, including the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI, have stated clearly that there is no current national security risk, no public safety concern, and no unlawful drone activity requiring intervention. So there either is a problem or there isn't a problem. If there is a problem, let's discuss how to do it while protecting the communications of innocent Americans whose communications could be caught up in this legislation. Until the assessment, the federal assessment changes. The assessment that it isn't a problem changes to that it is a problem, and these are the malefactors. These are the people that are orchestrating this. Let's get that from the Biden administration. Tell us what the problem is. Tell us the extent of the problem. Instead, the Biden administration is saying there's not a problem. So, Madam President, this pattern is all too familiar. History has shown us time and time again how fear and manufactured urgency are used as pretexts to expand government power at the expense of freedom. After 9/11, Congress passed the Patriot Act in the name of security. Americans were promised that these surveillance powers were necessary. They would only be directed towards foreigners. They would only be directed towards terrorists until we discovered that these powers were being used on Americans. Americans were promised that these powers were necessary and temporary. Instead, they were abused, misused, and weaponized. Innocent Americans had their privacy violated, their data collected, and their rights trampled. The lesson here is clear. When Congress legislates in haste, without careful scrutiny, without debate, and without accountability, it is the American people who suffer the consequences. Today, we are facing a similar moment. The bill before us would grant law enforcement significant authority to intercept private electronic communications without consent. For example, the bill would allow the government to conduct dragnet surveillance of the phones innocent Americans traveling through U.S. airports as long as the government claims they are doing it to neutralize a drone. So in order to look at the information that might be coming to a drone, it may be that you capture all the information of everybody surrounding an airport or everybody who lives near an airport. Once you have all that data, what are the assurances that the government isn't looking at your data in addition to the data that may be related to flying the drone? This is not just about security. It's about unchecked government overreach. It's about capitalizing on fear and media-driven hysteria to jam through sweeping legislation that could violate the civil liberties of American people. Congress has a constitutional responsibility to serve as a check on the executive power, not as a rubber stamp for it. The federal government already has the power to deal with drones. The federal government already has the power to stop any drones that are in airspace around airports. The federal government already has the power to protect its air bases. So if there is a significant problem here, the Biden administration needs to come forward and let us know, who are these drones? Who's operating these drones? What is the federal government doing to protect either airports or bases from this? Instead, we are told by the Biden administration there is no threat to our national security. So let's first insist on truth and transparency from the Biden administration before offering up legislation that is feel-good, pat somebody on the back and say, oh, we've done something about drones. We are strong on drones. Congress has a constitutional responsibility to serve as a check on executive power, not as a rubber stamp. We owe it to the American people to demand compelling justification, meaningful safeguards, and full transparency before granting any new surveillance authorities. We are a nation of laws, not fear, not panic, and not manufactured urgency. We do not trade away our freedoms, our privacy, and our constitutional protections for vague promises of security.